Hello chums, and welcome to Taming a Monster, the series where I take some of Gran Turismo 7's most ridiculous cars to see if I can tweak them so that a talentless pleb like me can handle them without being killed to death. Like any common ruffian, I'm using a bog standard PlayStation 5 controller, and I have all driver assists turned off, except for ABS. Let's see what car is trying to murder me today! In episode 2, I'll be attempting to tame the Corvette C4 ZR-1 that has the engine from the C7 ZR-1 fitted. This means that the fully upgraded horsepower goes from around 850 to over 1100. I'll be honest, I forgot this engine swap existed, mainly because I love the car so much on its standard engine. It drives very well indeed if it's tuned to 700 performance points. So, I needed to upgrade the engine swapped car and create a livery more befitting of a tarty Corvette. This car was requested by Tryhard Pirate 17, who described it as a decapitation factory, which I liked so much I'm going to use it in this video. Like before, the decapitation factory has been fully upgraded with every available tuning part, so suspension, differential, increased body rigidity, and so on. The downforce had to be maxed, otherwise the performance rating gets bugged and the car can't be used. It has wheels in the original size with wide offset and does not have the wide rim option. It has a front splitter, rear diffuser, and the custom wing, which gives more rear downforce than the ducktail or the hoop. Now, let's see how quickly my head gets removed. My initial testing will be at Watkins Glen, thanks to its S-bends and heavy braking zones. Plus, there's a race here that earns me some pennies. To begin with, it was actually going alright. It was a bit wobbly and wayward, but for a car with 1100 horsepower, I was just about managing to keep it straight and I felt fairly confident. The car veered into a wall and I was decapitated. Repeatedly. The reason it did this is similar to the issues people have had with the newly added E36 M3. With fully customizable suspension, the car has been lowered, but the natural frequency is still soft. So when you brake from high speeds, the nose of the car lunges and the wheel arches get jammed against the tyres, forcing the steering to go off in a random direction. So with body roll being the biggest problem, the first changes were to the anti-roll bars and the natural frequency. The front anti-roll bar is strengthened to keep the front end flatter and prevent arch rub, and the rear is weakened to try and make the car more stable. The natural frequency is then increased, more so at the front than the rear, for the same reasons. We want to reduce body roll so that it doesn't unsettle the decapitation factory, particularly when changing direction, and to prevent arch rubbing at the front. The car immediately felt better. At this point, the car is already easier to drive than the Porsche 930 Turbo from the previous episode. Body roll has been reduced, and for something with over 1100 horsepower, it doesn't spin the wheels nearly as much as you might expect. However, it is obviously still prone to wheel spin and power slides, so naturally you have to be careful with throttle application. I then experimented with the differential settings. I set initial torque low to make the car more agile to see if it's still controllable. I reduced acceleration sensitivity, which usually makes the power slightly more controllable, and I reduced braking sensitivity, which generally makes the brakes more responsive, but can affect stability. It performed well. It felt a tad more agile, though the car did feel a bit more unstable when braking. Other than that, there wasn't much of a change. Next, I reduced the camber to 1.8 and 2.0, the same as the 911 Turbo from the previous video. This should help with straight line stability. I then increased braking sensitivity on the differential to help stability under braking. The differences were subtle once again, but at this point I was pretty happy with the decapitation factory. On flat, smooth circuits, this car is what I would consider tame. But similar to the Porsche from the previous video, this setup won't work very well on tracks with more elevation change or uneven surfaces. So, we need to make a new setup sheet for the Corvette. I make several tweaks to the suspension that should help with stability, such as adding toe-in angle to the front to reduce lift-off oversteer, and adding more toe-in to the rear, which should make the car slightly more biased towards understeer when accelerating. I then tweak the differential settings for the same reasons before adding ballast weight, and then I run into an issue. Due to the polarizing new physics system from update 1.49, some cars have run into problems with the PP rating calculations, and the C4 is one of them. If you add too much weight towards the rear to help with traction, the rating system tries to eat its own shit. It takes a lot of experimenting, but eventually I managed to add some weight without the system cancelling itself. I then reduced front downforce, which if I had done that first, I could have then added more ballast to the rear. Gran Turismo logic. Off to the Nurburgring we go. Out on track, it's easier to handle than the Porsche 930 Turbo from the previous video, but this is travelling even faster through the high-speed sections, which means it's very easy to get caught out and, decapitated. The car handles the low-speed sections better than you think, since it's mostly stable at low speed, as long as you're careful with the throttle. However, it turned out that my ride height was still too low, which didn't catch me out until the Flantsgarten section, sorry for butchering that one, where there is a sudden dip which caused the wheels to hit the arches and wrenched the steering, so I hit the wall. The same thing then happened again at the Tiergarten section, just before the final corners. See, I make stupid mistakes so you don't have to. Despite both decapitations, the Corvette actually matched the time set by the engine swap 911 Turbo, which was somewhere just under 6 minutes 30. Anyway, this is my final setup. A few more tweaks have been made, including more weight further back, and the front end has been lifted, and the differential has also been adjusted again. If you're interested, here is also my gearing. I won't show you a full lap because it's a waste of your time, so I'll quickly just show the two sections that caused a spin before. After spending a day or two with it, this car is nowhere near as bad as I was led to believe, going by what I've seen in forums and comment sections. But my main takeaway is actually that this engine swap is a bit pointless. The C4 is actually one of my favourite cars when it's tuned to 700 performance points, and the C7 ZR-1, the donor car for the engine swap, has so much more downforce, so that it's more stable at high speed. So mixing the two together doesn't really make a lot of sense. Anyway, that was my attempt to tame a monster. I hope my advice and settings helped you. If you have any requests for any other monsters you want to see tamed, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and if you're feeling like a particularly magical little crumpet, I would greatly appreciate your subscription. Take care, and ta-ra!